Hey guys, the Wolf Den here, and welcome to the long overdue part 2 of Let's WAAAGH for the resin Ork Supa Kannon kit. In this video, we'll be taking a brief look at the Supa Kannon lore in universe and a brief history of the model itself. Then we'll be examining the parts of the Supa Kannon in a reference guide that I've made for this video, before moving on to the assembly of the model itself, which will be covered in both still images as well as me assembling the model on camera. Before we get started, I'd like to offer a small disclaimer. In my research and preparation for this video, I have not been able to find a 100% definitive instruction guide or instructions in general for how to assemble this model correctly. I have found scattered images and references of the model partially built, as well as painted references, as well as both Forge World and Games Workshop reference material and promotional images, but no concrete instructions. So, in short, I'll be putting this model together with the best of my ability and offering the best results that I can. Let's get into it. The Ork race in the Warhammer 40,000 universe lives to fight, and it seemingly eats, breathes, and sleeps for the sole reason of finding new ways to bring death and destruction throughout the galaxy. One of the Ork's countless ways of doing so is through the use of a wide variety of explosive, beam, and shell-firing weapons, ranging in size from field gun emplacements to extremely powerful long-range weapon systems, similar to the artillery weapons of the other races, or the heavy guns mounted on their vehicles. These heavy weapons are, in some respects, a representation of Ork warfare in of itself. These weapons, more often than not, are large in size. They fire with a deafening roar, and upon impact create a massive explosion or detonation, much to the joy of the surrounding Orks. There are many types and variations of these weapons, as different mech boys, or mechs for short, are able to produce a wide range of these fearsome weapons. One of the many subgroups of Ork weaponry are known as cannons to the Orks. These weapons can vary in size, appearance, and destructive power depending on the mech who constructs them. Cannons can range from smaller field guns moved about on the battlefield and fired by Gretchen gunners, while other cannons can be truly gigantic and mounted on the largest of Ork mobile vehicles, such as the mighty battle wagons or mega dreads. These weapons can fire an infantry shredding frag shell or an anti-vehicle shell for destroying enemy tanks, transports, and other forms of heavy armor, as the Orks call it. These cannons fire with a deafening roar that pleases all the nearby Orks in the vicinity. One of the many subtypes of cannon is its larger cousin, dubbed a Supa Kannon. These large, intimidating artillery pieces are often mounted on mobile Ork vehicles, such as half-tracks, big tracks, or dedicated cannon wagons or trucks. Sometimes Supa Cannons are mounted on the howdahs of the monstrous gargantuan squigoths as a supplemental weapon to the beast's monstrous size. Supa Cannons are, in essence, massive artillery versions of their smaller cannon cousins, designed to punch through and destroy enemy battlements and positions. However, their Gretchen crew, commanded by Ork overseers, have zero qualms about targeting infantry or vehicles with their destructive wrath. Many of these weapons are salvaged and improved by Ork standards, versions of the Imperial Guard's long-range Basilisk artillery cannon. However, the Supa Kannon itself lacks the range of the Basilisk. The Supa Kannon is a high-velocity gun, which has been cited by the Order Xenos as having an approximate caliber of 135 millimeters. However, this is by no means definitive, as Ork mechs hardly ever have a standard pattern of construction, with no two pieces ever being identical. When a proper target is slated for destruction, the Supa Kannon fires with a high explosive and deflagrating shell, resulting in a massive explosion and destruction upon impact. The Ork Supa Kannon kit was an all-resin model kit produced by Forge World. The model itself included both the cannon and a crew of Gretchen to man it. The first version of the Supa Kannon in its prototype stages was first previewed at the Forge World Open Day 2009 event. This earlier version of the Supa Kannon sports a different barrel than the final release version. Later that same year, the Supa Kannon saw its initial release as a standalone upgrade kit for Ork Vehicles. And later in 2010, the Supa Kannon was packaged with the plastic Ork battle wagon as a combination kit. Both the Supa Kannon by itself and the battle wagon with Supa Kannon kits were made and sold by Forge World and Games Workshop up until 2023, in which the Supa Kannon and, by extension, the Supa Kannon Battle Wagon kit were discontinued by Games Workshop. The Ork Supa Kannon kit is a resin Forge World model kit. It was originally shipped, as far as I can tell thanks to these old pictures, in a plastic Forge World bag with no instructions. I like to refer to this as being one of the kits from the Forge World Dark Ages, as many older Forge World kits were in essence similar to fan-made resin garage kits, as in they adopted a, if you buy this model we expect you to know what you're doing and we're going to give you minimal help mindset. It was expected for the customer to figure out how to assemble the kit with little to no assistance. This design philosophy changed over time, however this still leaves a lack of official reference guides and assembly instructions for these models outside of completed images. With that being said, I'm going to do my best to offer a how-to guide in assembling your Supa Kannon kit. First, we'll be taking a look at a parts reference guide that I made especially for this video, that shows off the parts that come in this kit to make assembly easier. So before we take a look at our parts guide, I'd like to briefly go over the steps that I take to prepare resin model kits for assembly and painting. I will be publishing a full how to prepare resin model kit video in the future, so this will only be a brief summary of what I do. First and foremost, before you start assembling your resin model kit, you're going to want to let your model pieces sit in a warm, soapy solution of dish, soap, and water for about 24 hours. Then, once it's had the opportunity to sit for about a day, gently scrub each part with an old toothbrush, making sure to get into each crack and crevice and all of the surfaces. Once the scrubbing is done, rinse each part in warm water and let each part dry for a few hours. The purpose of this process is to remove a substance called release agent, which is often found on resin model kits, as well as metal model kits. This release agent can interfere with both the applying and sticking of glue, as well as paint and primer adhesion. So it's very important to clean your parts before you begin to make sure you remove all of the release agent. Alternatively, you can use a device called an ultrasonic cleaner, which is my go-to method of choice for preparing resin miniatures. These handy little machines use vibrations to essentially do the same work as scrubbing each part like a toothbrush, and can be found cheaply on eBay. A lot of them are roughly the size of a toaster, if not smaller. The process of using an ultrasonic cleaner is roughly the same as hand washing. Simply pour a mix of dish, soap, and warm water into the machine, add your resin parts, and let the machine go to work for usually about 15 minutes per batch of parts. Then washing all parts once you're finished in warm water and letting them dry. Once your parts are clean, you'll want to prep each resin part by removing the large resin gate pieces that are commonly cast with each part. They usually look like large squares, rectangles, or excess pieces of resin. You're going to want to remove these either with a pair of clippers or a hobby knife, making sure to be extremely careful while you do so. Titans often have gates so large that you may need to use a hobby saw. So again, please be careful when you do this. You're also going to want to wear a mask or a breathing mask while cutting or sawing resin pieces, as resin dust is harmful to breathe in. You are definitely going to want to be super careful while you do this. Then carefully use a hobby knife to remove any mold lines and seams that are on your resin pieces. You're going to want to wear your mask for this part too. Once the mold lines and gates are removed, you're ready to assemble your model kit. Now that we have all of our pieces washed, prepped, and cleaned, though I haven't removed all of the mold lines off my Supa Kannon yet, let's take a closer look at the parts you'll find in a Supa Kannon kit. So here we have a customs part diagram with all of the parts laid out. I made this to help identify the pieces that you'll get, as the lack of instructions can make it tricky to tell which piece is which. Of course, my labels certainly aren't perfect. Piece set 1. First, we have 3 25mm bases for the grots. Piece 2. Next, we have our 3 Gretchen gunners. These will be placed on the 25mm bases, 1 grot per base. I absolutely love these sculpts. They're so expressive and so full of personality. Part 3. Ammo box. This is a cosmetic piece. I've seen it placed on an additional 25mm base or glued next to the cannon as terrain. Part 4. Battle wagon support frame. This piece is used for creating a platform for the Gretchen to stand on behind the Supa Kannon when mounted on a battle wagon kit. Part 5. Artillery axle. This piece is, from what I can tell, used to allow the Supa Kannon to rotate on one of the selected bases and has to be cut to size. Part 6. Artillery base. This piece is a standard Forge World Ork upgrade weapon base. It's designed to be used either as a static base or mounted on a vehicle. It's one of the optional bases that come with this kit. Part 7. Battle wagon base. This piece is specifically meant to mount the Supa Kannon inside of a plastic Ork battle wagon, or anything that uses the battle wagon chassis assembly. It's designed to slot in between the armored panels, and these smaller resin bits are supports. Part 8. Supa Kannon structural base. The foundation in which the Supa Kannon is built on. The 2-foot platforms are not resin gates, but are part of the base itself, so make sure not to snip these off. We'll go through the correct position and orientation for these during the assembly. Part 9. Supa Kannon superstructure right piece. The right side of the Supa Kannon frame when looking at the cannon facing outward and from above. The easiest way to remember which piece is what is due to the sculpted in light detail on the right hand piece. Part 10. Supa Kannon superstructure left piece. The left side of the Supa Kannon superstructure when looking at it from above. Note the way that the supports for the cannon in the middle piece are facing. Part 11. The barrel. The barrel and main part of the Supa Kannon. This part will probably need to be submerged in warm water or to use a hairdryer once clean to ease the resin to make the cannon straight. Part 12. Gun shield. The gun shield for the Supa Kannon. Note the 2 prongs near the top of the gun shield itself. These are very delicate and may also need to be bent into shape using warm water or a hairdryer to go straight into the barrel. Part 13. Breech block. The breech block of the Supa Kannon. This part can be positioned either opened or closed, but looks most natural in the closed position. Part 14. Hydraulic recoil tube buffer. I'm not entirely sure what this part is supposed to be. As far as I can tell, it's a hydraulic recoil tube or a buffer. It's flat on both sides and mounted in the middle of the back of the Supa Kannon behind the gun shield. And with that, we have completed all of our parts. In addition to your parts, you're going to want to get yourself a super glue of your choice and making sure it's not plastic glue, as plastic glue will not work on this model. This is my super glue of choice that I use for resin models, metal models, and gluing magnets into place to magnetize models. Though feel free to use a super glue that you prefer and follow all precautions when using it to keep yourself safe. The first step in assembling your Supa Kannon is simply gluing your grots to their 25mm bases. Honestly, really self-explanatory, but for the sake of documentation, I've decided to make this the first step. Make sure to only use a small amount of super glue and gently hold the grot in place while the glue dries. Repeat for the other two crewmates and this step is completed. Of course, there's always the option to glue the grots directly to the cannon itself, but for the sake of this video, I'll just be gluing them to their bases so they can be moved around. Now that our Gretchen crew is out of the way, let's get into the assembly of the Supa Kannon. For the first steps, you're going to need parts 8 and 9 to begin. You're going to want to place the floor pieces of the Supa Kannon with the large platform facing the right, or in this case, facing downwards. Remember, the first piece of the Supa Kannon structure we're going to need is the one with the light on it. That's what helped me remember to tell the pieces apart while dealing with glue. Also, as a note, the base of the Supa Kannon has paths for you to slot the main parts of the gun into. There's also these main supports as well as the edge of the cannon platforms itself. Gently take your super glue and apply a thin line of glue along the bottom edge of the structure piece before pressing it down gently between the notches of the support base like so. These parts are going to hold a lot of weight, so be generous in how much super glue you apply. Press down between the notches and let it dry. This next part is a personal preference of mine and is optional if you want the Supa Kannon to pivot up and down. I like to add a small bit of super glue to axles and points of articulation and letting them dry. This will add resistance to moving parts and allow them to be posed easier, especially those that weigh a bit, like the barrel of the Supa Kannon. Feel free to ignore this if you plan on gluing yours into a select position. Next, we're going to need the barrel for this step. Take your barrel piece and on the right side hole, gently insert the Supa Kannon barrel into the right side of the peg. If you plan on making your Supa Kannon unable to move or to be positioned, you can simply add a drop of super glue into this hole and allowing it to dry in position. This will keep your Supa Kannon secure if you don't want it to move. Next, we'll be forming the other side of the Supa Kannon. This part is a bit trickier as the left side wall piece has several parts that must be slotted into place along the base to hold the cannon in place properly, as well as meeting the pieces that we have already. This includes the hole in the gun barrel itself, the slot on the bottom part of the cannon piece where it connects to the support, as well as lining up the two wall pieces that connect the front and back of the Supa Kannon, which roughly forms a box shape connected to the base. I find it's easiest to start by applying a small line of super glue under the wall part to begin. Next, take your super glue and apply a small line on the trench that are found on the inside of the part. Add another line of super glue to the opposite wall and make sure you keep your hands clear so they don't stick to anything. Place the left Supa Kannon wall part into its slot in the base, making sure to add glue. Make sure you align both the front wall and back walls of both pieces together to hold the Supa Kannon together in place on its base. I also went ahead and added a bit of super glue into the other slot of the barrel as well. Only a tiny bit to allow my Supa Kannon to move up and down. Feel free to use more if you're going to keep yours static. Gently pinch all of the glued parts together for a few minutes and let dry. Step 4. Take the breech block as well as the new dried Supa Kannon. My piece is a bit busted up, but you'll want to place the notch that has hinges on it to the right side of the cannon's breech, lining up the sections on the right side as you do so. Add a tiny bit of glue to the back end of the barrel and place the breech block into place. You can position this piece as opened as well as closed, but I prefer it closed. Also, take this time to check your model over to make sure none of the walls have come apart. or become unglued during handling. Add a bit of super glue if needed and allow all the parts to dry before proceeding to the next step. Next, take the hydraulic recoil tube and add a small line of super glue onto the oval-shaped indent in the top of the back part of the barrel near the breech and let it dry. As far as I could tell, both sides are identical, so orientation doesn't matter here. For the last step, take the gun shield and add a small bit of super glue onto each peg on the gun shield, and gently insert each peg into the slots on the gun barrel itself. These pegs are very fragile, so be careful when inserting them. And with the gun shield in place, the build is complete. Once all of the parts have taken some time to dry, you'll be ready to prime your Supa Kannon for painting. This section of the video is how to prepare your Supa Kannon to be placed onto a plastic Games Workshop battle wagon. For this part, you'll need your completed Supa Kannon, the battle wagon base, the Supa Kannon platform, and the extra ammo box containing the shells. First, we're going to need a battle wagon. Remove the upper levels of the battle wagon and place them aside if you use those in your build, or simply build the kit without the upper levels and platform with gun turret. Next, take the battle wagon Supa Kannon base and slot it into the back section of the battle wagon, making sure the support pieces on either side are on either side of the trenches. Apply a bit of super glue if you're going to make this permanent under the base as well as the supports for a permanent fix, as the super glue will bond the resin to the plastic parts of the battle wagon. Next, you're going to want to get your Supa Kannon platform. Simply take the platform and slot it into the back of the battle wagon, making sure to note the position of the exhaust pipe on the wagon itself and the slot in the support platform. The part should simply slot into place. Feel free to use a bit of warm water or a hairdryer to work the pieces into position if they won't fit. Use a bit of super glue, again, to make this piece permanent if you want the platform on permanently. Finally, take your completed Supa Kannon, simply place the cannon down so the peg on the base slots into the hole of the Supa Kannon. You can do several things at this step. You could use a magnet on both parts to make the Supa Kannon magnetizable for a more secure fit that's not 100% permanent. And this would allow you to put other upgrades like the lift-a-droppa, as well as putting the armored casing back onto the rear of the vehicle. You could also simply add a bit of super glue around the peg, which should offer some resistance to allow the Supa Kannon to be removed manually. Or you could simply glue the Supa Kannon onto the peg permanently. The choice is up to you. The ammo box can be positioned anywhere you want on the wagon itself, as well as the grot crew. The last section of the video is going to show how to make your Supa Kannon able to be a weapon on a gargantuan Squiggoth's howdah as a static fortification to be used as custom weapons on other Ork vehicles or in kit bashes. You're going to want to take your Supa Kannon, as well as the generic artillery base and mounting peg. An interesting point to note is that the generic artillery base has a slot in which, with a little bit of widening, would be perfect for adding a magnet if you plan on making your Supa Kannon swappable between models. An added magnet onto the Supa Kannon itself would allow it to be swapped between a gargantuan Squiggoth's howdah, a battle wagon, or other models by magnetizing both the cannon itself or the generic artillery base. As far as I can tell, the peg slots into the base like so, and would need to be trimmed to fit properly into the Supa Kannon's base. This would allow the gun to rotate. So really simple stuff here. You're going to want to take your gargantuan Squiggoth's howdah like so. There's no real set position for the Supa Kannon to go on. I've seen it mounted on the front plate as well as the rear of the howdah towards the back of the model, which is where I prefer to have it, given the size of the weapon. Place the peg onto the base and select a spot for it. Make sure to glue the base down and trim the peg to fit onto the Supa Cannon's base. This may need some additional modification. I chose to set my base near the back of the Squigot's howdah. Once the base is slotted in and glued down with super glue, get your Supa Cannon, add a bit of glue onto its base and slot it down onto the peg connected to the artillery base and howdah, and you're finished. This location that I've chosen allows the Supa Cannon to be pivoted on the gargantuan Squigot's back, as well as having a decent area to rotate in. You can add your ammo box in your crew, and you're done. Thank you very much for checking out my first major tutorial video, and I hope it helps you with assembling or kit bashing your own Supa Cannon for your Warhammer 40k Ork armies.